It is a symbol as global, as ubiquitous as the McDonald's arches, as the Coca-Cola logo. The Nike swoosh is truly recognized around the world. But for founders Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman, that success was achieved after nearly 40 years of effort. It was an effort that included not only developing some of the world's best athletic shoes and other apparel, but conveying Nike's deepest held beliefs to millions of consumers.
I think probably the starting place for us as a company is the mission statement is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And if you have a body, you're an athlete. And I think the important thing from us as a brand is that innovation sort of lies within our mission statement. So maybe differently from maybe many other companies, everyone in the company is charged with being an innovator. It doesn't matter what element of the business you work on, you know, coming up with something new is a revered sort of value at this organization.
That innovation began in the 1960s when Knight and Bowerman began designing running shoes. Success was modest at first, but things began to change in 1973 when Nike signed up its first athletes who were paid to wear Nike shoes. Among them, Steve Prefontaine, the Oregon track star who went on to set a number of U.S. running records. Even in its early days, Nike realized the value of forming close partnerships with some of the world's top athletes. That association with excellence clearly benefits the brand. But Nike says their relationships with sports stars goes far beyond simple product endorsements or putting athletes' names on various buildings around their campus.
It's almost like if you look at innovation, you say you kind of start at the top. So you go to the athletes, like the elite athletes, who are obviously seeking to be just a second faster. You know, they're seeking just to be a little ahead of everybody else. And so every minute difference makes a difference, right? And that for us has been a very important gift from those athletes, which is they tell us about the products, they tell us about what their goals are, and our task to try and achieve those goals sort of helps us to create something that's really new and something that's really different.
Nike also recognized in order to achieve their aggressive growth plans that they needed to appeal to multiple market segments.
And so first and foremost, it's always to the performer, the ultimate athlete, people who participate in sport to be an athlete. Then there's the participant, somebody who says, you know, I don't necessarily see myself as an athlete, but the activities that they do would be viewed as athletic or being part of sport. And then there are those who influence the world and are influenced by the culture of sport, right? So you think of three different consumers, those are three different ways that we actually expand our brand and talk to them in very different ways.
One key to Nike's approach to reaching these different segments was a concept called the pyramid of influence. The fact that product and brand choices in the mass market were influenced by the preferences and behavior of a small percentage of top athletes. Even though the vast majority of athletic shoes were never actually used on the court, but rather in other settings like just walking around, Nike learned early on that the choices of these casual users were affected by the choices of more serious athletes. Thus, a company whose leaders once largely shunned advertising began spending millions on sports celebrity endorsements.
Make the logo bigger.
It's Michael Jordan or Ronaldo or Tiger Woods or Mia Hamm. Any of those athletes represents in some respects excellence. But there's also some more personal sides to them, whether it's their strive to win or their strive to be humble. I think all of those things speak a bit about our brand in general, but it also speaks about the character of many of these athletes. And so, yes, the association helps the brand, but it also allows us to dimensionalize who we are and what we stand for all of the time.
Nike's early endorsement choices were a combination of good planning and good luck. Michael Jordan was just an up-and-coming rookie basketball player when the company signed him in 1985. As his fame grew, Nike sold more than $100 million worth of Air Jordans in the first year alone. But not all of their athletes were known for their graciousness and humility. John McEnroe, whose name graces one of the buildings at Nike's Oregon headquarters, was chosen for just the opposite reason.
I mean, you could pick John McEnroe, who I think was decidedly controversial in his message because he felt he wanted to change the way tennis was, the establishment of tennis. And I think sometimes that's a good voice. And, you know, so it isn't always the person who walks the same path as everybody else. Sometimes it's finding those athletes who walk a different path who have a different viewpoint, and they are as important to our brand because they express a dimension of individuality and that ability to stand up for what you believe is the way the world should be. And I think that's always been a very important part of our brand.
Nike's decision to put as much emphasis on the consumer as the product, to sign major athletes, and to advertise heavily all paid off in the late 80s and early 90s. The Just Do It campaign was successful, and by 1990, Nike sales surpassed $2 billion, reclaiming the U.S. market lead from arch rival Reebok. But Europe would prove to be a bigger challenge, especially dislodging German giant Adidas. Nike knew it would have to establish a major presence amongst top sports on the continent.
We made a commitment probably in the 90s where we said, God, if we are going to be truly a global sports company, we must be successful in soccer. And for us, that meant creating great product and being able to connect with the soccer players in a very compelling way. So we expanded in the U.S. in some very important categories for the U.S. and then internationally, soccer was really the sport that would make us sort of an international and importantly a global company. And so we've really expanded the sports we are in today, and we will continue to expand the sports that we connect with because ultimately, like the mission says, it's to inspire and innovate for every athlete in the world.
Nike wisely chose to focus on major sporting events like the 1992 Barcelona Olympics and the 1994 World Cup. They increased their European advertising budget from $10 million in 1987 to $100 million in 1993. They also made progress in authenticating the brand with sports fans in Europe and worldwide, signing up stars like soccer great Ronaldo and sponsoring entire teams like World Cup winner Brazil and perennial powerhouse Italy. As a result, they succeeded in changing Nike's image from a fashion-oriented shoe to a performance shoe, and European revenues grew from $920 million in 1994 to $1.3 billion in 1996. They also modified their global advertising to make it resonate more with regional tastes.
I think as a brand, we're pretty well known. I think if you go almost to all around the world, I mean, I've been to many different places around the world, and you meet someone and you say you're from Nike, and people go, the swoosh. So clearly we know that we have a very high awareness. So for us, when we do sponsorships or we do partnerships, more importantly, it's really about relevance. It's about telling a story about your brand specifically. So the interaction that a consumer should be having with your brand at that point in time is about, why is this brand here? And how does this location, whether it's an athletic event, reinforce the message of your brand?
Nike's path to success has not been without stumbles. Charges of worker exploitation in Asia forced the company to work hard to improve labor conditions and public relations. And they sometimes have been behind the curve compared to competitors, like failing to seize the aerobics craze in the 1980s and the more recent growth in extreme or non-traditional sports. However, once they do respond, the company has a history of being both aggressive and successful, like with its ACG brand in 1999 and its more recent Presto line and ad campaign, both for younger consumers.
And so it showed it put their lifestyle first and then sort of designed according to their lifestyle, but yet had the same functionality that you would have of a high-performance athletic shoe. And so therein was birthed Presto. And it began as really a running shoe that was an ultra-lightweight running shoe that was extremely comfortable, that you were able to slip it on really quickly. And so we used that inspiration to create a bag, a watch, and all of these products really speak to your life, but importantly have the functionality of a sports product. And therefore we were expanding to a group of consumers who might have looked at Nike and said, God, Nike's only about sports, or it's only about traditional sports. And they saw it as, no, Nike's beyond just traditional sports. Nike's for me because I want to be active, and Nike recognizes that.
By the year 2000, the Nike swoosh logo was recognizable to 97% of American citizens. But that marketing success has a flip side, almost a resentment among some consumers about Nike's ubiquitous presence and success. For some, this was no longer an anti-establishment brand, but part of the establishment. To this and many past challenges, Nike often turns inward, refocusing and recommitting to its core values.
There are probably two zones. One is a very simple idea that everything you do communicates something about your brand, whether that's positive or negative. And so for us, being able to tell a very integrated message about what we stood for has always been one of the hallmarks of Nike. I think, but what that forces you to then say is, what do you stand for? And know what you stand for all of the time. For Nike, innovation has always been one of our most important initiatives. Inspiration from a values perspective, being able to connect with consumers, caring about what they stand for, are some very important values for us as a brand. But importantly, we are always of sports or being active, or the aspect of being somebody who's about movement. We are not a stationary brand. It's almost just not our nature to be that. So for me, know who you stand for all the time. Everything communicates, every single thing that you do. So try and control every single element of your communications, and make sure it tells a positive message about your brand.
Though the turn of the century brought several years of stagnant growth, Nike's leaders are committed to remaining a positive global household name. Efforts to better control their retail presence began with company-owned stores like Niketown, and continues with new product lines, including those geared towards female consumers.
When you started with a very clear brand promise, which was to serve the athlete and make great performance products, and then you expand that viewpoint and say, you know, if you have a body, you are an athlete, then clearly that scope is very, very wide. So it's important to be very calculated as you make those expansions so that you don't dilute your brand.
As Nike attempts to expand its connection to new categories and towards new consumers, it realizes the need to consistently explore opportunities to grow its business whether or not times are prosperous. Key to that will be maintaining their brand equity and holding true to their brand promise, keeping the Nike name special and unique.
I think it comes from a very simple idea, and at the end of the day, we spend all of our time every single day trying to keep the specialness of Nike, and partly that is driven by the culture of the people around, their desire to be inventive, their desire to be innovative, their desire to do something different. I think ultimately any brand or any organization is really just a sort of a conglomeration of all the people and all the activities, and importantly the passion that they all feel for what they do. And if I'd say there's one hallmark that I've certainly found at Nike in my 10 years is people here are passionate, and that truly makes a difference.
As it faces an increasingly competitive future, this multi-billion-dollar company may do well to adhere to one of its own ad slogans from the 1980s. There is no finish line. For the Pearson Video Library, I'm Mike Sanford, Business Now.